Hello and welcome to Healthy Vibrations once again. Super excited to be here and super excited to be with our guest today who's from the UK and who's a health coach. We have Sue Sanders with us and she specializes in a connection between physical and mental health. So this is especially for all our youth sitting out there. You need to listen to this. And she's coming straight from the UK. We're going to listen to her journey. We're going to have some questions for her and we're going to learn how your physical and your mental health is connected. So like many other healthcare practitioners, Sue's passion for health and wellness began after she experienced difficulties in her own health journey. And she trained with the College of Naturopathic Medicine and took a functional integrative approach to health, working one-on-one with clients to identify the root cause of the problem and finding personalized, sustainable solutions for better physical and mental health. She currently lives in London and with her husband, 2 kids, 2 dogs, and 2 chickens. I'm very excited to see those chickens, Sue.
They're an essential part of our family.
Yes. So welcome to Healthy Vibrations. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. I'm very happy to be here and to be talking to you.
Lovely to have you. You are a first guest from overseas, so thank you for joining us today. Yes, first guest. So thank you very much for joining us today. And this podcast is especially targeted to our youth as they struggle with a lot of mental health. This is a very, very anxious generation since they have been exposed to the internet ever since they were born, and with the pandemic and with all the events happening around the world, these guys suffer a lot of anxiety. So I think it'll be very nice to hear from you how they can tie their physical and mental health, grow up to be more healthy mentally, physically, and become the leaders of tomorrow to lead the world. So thank you very much once again for being with us. Why don't you share your journey with us? How did you get into this? What drives you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? And making a difference each day in the young lives as well as more.
Yeah.
So tell us.
Well, my journey started when I was probably about the same age as your listeners. So I was in my teens and I had a hell of a time, to be honest. I started, it's probably about 16, 17, I started to experience bouts of depression and anxiety. Like you said, nowhere near, not as much to contend with as the youth today does have, but, just the usual teenage stuff. And about the same time, probably I wasn't eating very well. I was starting to go out late. I wasn't taking care of my body. And I ended up in my mid-20s in quite a mess, and I was living in a slum in Streatham in London, not particularly nice situation to end up in, and was at the end of my tether. I really was suicidal, and I suffered these sort of huge bouts of acute depression, and then I would have periods when I was almost hyperactive, and as it transpired, I was diagnosed in mid-20s, so I was probably about 25 when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which is a condition where you do swing from this sort of deep depression to this hypomanic state where it can be very excitable. So sort of, I think, ADHD kind of hyperactivity symptoms, but then you would crash down the other side of that into this sort of really deep depression. And yeah, it was a really difficult time. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and I wouldn't want to go back there. And I was very lucky. I had help. I had help from my parents. I had a good connection with them. My sister was very close. I was very close with her at the time, and she literally came down and took me out of the horrible living situation I was in, and took me in and got me an appointment with a psychiatrist. And we gradually clawed my way out of this hole, and it wasn't a quick process. It was a very painful process. But I've been asked before if you could push the button and take it all away, would you? And absolutely wouldn't, because it's given me such an insight and a compassion for mental health issues across the board, and to be able to help and identify issues that my own children have now, who are that age when I started to have these issues, is invaluable. what I didn't realize back then was that what I actually started to do within my daily life, in terms of my lifestyle, in terms of my food, my exercise, getting outside, all the different things that I now know to be beneficial, I started doing those, and it had this sort of knock-on effect in my mental health. So my physical health was pretty rough back then as well. I was doing all the things that you shouldn't do as a kid. And as I started to clean up my act in terms of my lifestyle and my diet, I noticed that I wasn't needing as much medication, because I was on medication back then. I noticed that things were changing. I was feeling less anxious, that my highs weren't as high, that my lows weren't as low. And I was really intrigued by this, and I started to learn, and I haven't really stopped learning since, up to the point where I decided to train as a health coach so that I could actually then use those tools to help other people. And so it's that two things, having this sort of experience myself, and then sort of doing the learning and having and educating myself, combined the things that I now offer my clients in terms of, giving them support and helping them help themselves, because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I think a lot of people, they want to change, but they don't quite know how, or they're in this despairing state, and they just don't see a way out of it. And that's where I come in, and that's something I'm deeply passionate about for all the reasons that I've just said.
Thank you so much. I so resonate with you. Just yesterday, I was doing a video on how to get rid of anxiety. And back 10 years ago, when I remember, again, in my teenage years, not 10 years ago, but beyond that, no, 10 years ago wasn't my teenage, so no. Back in my teenage years, I was equally bad. And I was like a hamster on the wheel. I couldn't understand where my anxiety stemmed from and where it ended. And it was like you were going around in circles, and there was no end to this. And that's when I stepped into all of my yoga practice, meditation practice, and all of these things. So it's amazing how our own journey kind of drives our passion, and then we come into our reality. So it's very, very, thank you for sharing that with us. Now, tell me, so what was that point when you realized, okay, this far, no further? And what got you to that point? What was that turning point? If you can recall it, what was that turning point?
The turning point, I think, my low was being in a squat in London and wanting to end my own life. And I remember my sister actually saying to me, you almost persuaded me that it was better for you to take your own life, because I gave her such a lucid argument about why I would be better off dead. And she said it shocked her so much that she'd almost got to the point where she was agreeing with me. And I remember that was a real turning point, because she then got me help, and she literally marched me into the office of a private psychiatrist and a psychotherapist. So I had psychotherapy, and it was, the turning point then was going to the psychotherapy for two reasons. One, because for more than two, but mainly because it was somewhere to go every week. So when you can't get out of bed, or you just think nothing is worth it, for me, there was that focal point that each week, no matter what happened, I had to get out of bed, I had to get on the tube, I had to cross London, I had to go and see this lady. And that became sort of a bit of a lifeline. And then as I did that, and I then went through I think I had about 18 months at the time of it, of psychotherapy. And at the same time, I was medicated. So we were trying different medications, and that was starting to help. And that became the upward sort of spiral then. But it was that feeling that I just had nothing left to give that was my rock bottom. And I think everybody knows that feeling of rock bottom in their life
Yes.
at some point, don't they? Whether it's a physical, something physical, you know. It's interesting to me that we all do seem to have to get to that crunch point before we do anything.
Yes.
Don't we?
We have to get to the rock bottom before we come up. So
Absolutely. And that's
we
the
have to.
sad thing.
It is.
I'd love to prevent that. You know, that's why I teach my kids what I teach them, and I try to teach people lifestyle habits and ways that they can manage their health, both their physical and mental health, so that they never get to that point. That would be my ideal thing, that we don't ever get to that rock bottom and then have to have that eureka moment when we say, right, enough. That's the sadness. I don't really want anyone to have to go through that and get to that point.
And I think that's where coaches come in. I think coaches we're still trying to prove our profession, to be very honest, because a lot of people don't believe in the coaching profession. At least in the United States, it's still getting a little more popular. But I think, like you said, a lot of people know what they want to do, but they don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
And they lack accountability, because not everybody has self-accountability.
Yeah. I mean, I needed that once a week to get me through that period. And I think that's where coaching is invaluable, you know, not just from what you're learning, but there's that routine and that lifeline, and that can be really, really important to people who are depressed and anxious, that they have those kind of like milestones that you get to.
And I don't think it's only depressed and anxious. I feel like anybody who wants to go from good to great needs a coach.
Yes.
You know, that's truly what I believe in. I'm like, everybody has a potential, and often we don't have the ability to have that 50 feet strategy of looking at ourselves and saying, okay, what is it more that I can do? But when somebody from the outside comes in, you know, they can actually look at you from 50 feet above and say, okay, I think you're missing this. Maybe you can add this to your portfolio. Yeah. So I think that's where a coach comes in.
That you definitely need that other perspective. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you said about the hitting rock bottom, I think my rock bottom was when I was 15 years ago, when I was given a bottle of antidepressants. After I went through a broken marriage, and I was walking back from the doctors, and she gave me an antidepressants, and I just looked at that. I said, no, I'm not going to do this. And I went and I flushed them down, and that was the day I got up, and I never sat back again. So I think we all have that. But it's very important for our youth today and more people not to hit that rock bottom. And if people like you and me and can save those people, why not? And we're not here to save, but at least do whatever we can in our little bit to kind of promote it. So I know you believe in, you do physical and mental health, and I'm a strong believer that your mind is a reflection of your body and vice versa. Because I'm a yoga practitioner. So that's what I believe. And I do yoga every single day, and I can't do without it. And I try and tell people this, that your body is a reflection of your mind. And sometimes youth look at me and like, what the hell are you talking about? So why don't you tell us, what is the science behind it? So I can explain to my children a little more science.
I can give you a great example of where your body and your mind is connected straight away. So if you think about an embarrassing thought, what happens to your face? Your blood vessels dilate and you flush. If you think about something frightening and your heart starts to race, that's the mind, your thought, influencing your body. There's a physical reaction in your body that comes from something you think. That's the mind-body connection. So this isn't woo. This is what we experience, this connection on a daily basis, you know, hundreds and hundreds of times, but we just don't notice it because we're so used to it. What's more interesting now is that what we're seeing is how we think and how we feel can it has a physical manifestation in our body that has things like, for example, we've most people will accept that if they get stressed, they may get a headache, or if they get nervous, they may get a tummy pain. But that's just scratching the surface, and there is a lot more to this mind-body connection. The science is mainly that there is our mind and body should never have been disconnected in the first place. We tend to treat in this country, and certainly in the US, I think as well, we treat our body in these, we compartmentalize it. We treat our brain, we treat our knee, we treat our wrist, our lungs, our kidneys. We have a different doctor for everything, you know, a skin doctor and a musculoskeletal. We have a doctor for everything. We treat everything separately. But the reality is, this we're not a machine. This thing works in synergy. It works as a whole. And so my question would be, why would you think that the mind and body wasn't connected? I mean, it's so connected. And, you know, just these simple examples of, you know, when you think about something, when you think about eating your favorite food, your mouth can fill up with saliva, right? Mine's just watering, just thinking about it. Right. So that's a real time, you know, example of this connection. This isn't woo-woo. This is physiological changes. And there's a famous book by a lady called Candace Pert, which is brilliant for this, if anyone wants to dig into the science. And it's called The Molecules of Emotion. And she actually went out to sort of show and to prove that through science, that how we think and how we feel has a physiological effect in our bodies, and to demonstrate that. And before then, really, so that people used to think the brain was just this electrical kind of machine. And, you know, actually what we know now is it's far more hormonal. So it's just a bag of hormones. And I think Candace Pert, she describes the body as being the unconscious mind, which I think is a fantastic way of thinking about it. So that reflection is really much more of a it's like a superhighway. So we have something called the vagus nerve, which you probably know about if you're doing yoga, right? Which goes from the base of our brain right down into our stomachs, into our gut lining, and that's a super highway of information. So that's both ways we get information, both electrically through there, between our brains and our guts, and through our guts into all other organs, because through our bloodstream and into all our organs in our bodies are affected by electrical and hormonal messaging that goes on when we think and when we feel.
Interesting, very interesting. I think that these are the same messages that we talk in yoga, except we just talk in two different languages, right? Yeah. I think that's the only difference, right? I think we're all spreading the same message. And I say the same thing. I'm like, you know, you feel that that gut feeling, like you said, when you're nervous, your stomach goes upset. When you're anxious, your stomach is upset. So yes, I agree with you. So maybe, hopefully, all our youth who are listening to this will now feel a little more connected with this. So how do you think, Sue, can we improve our mental health with positive lifestyle changes? As you know, in the United States specifically, the junk food that people eat here, and when you go to schools and my son is now older, he's now going to be 19, but when he was younger and I would go and look at his meal plans in school, it was disgusting. It was beyond disgusting. I was like, my child is not going to eat food like this. But that's how people eat here in the United States. And obesity is very common in the United States. So how do you think can we improve our mental health with positive physical lifestyle changes, whether that's our eating habits or whether that's exercising? How does that impact us?
Yeah, food is a big one because it affects a lot more than your physical health. Let's start with food. So yeah, junk food is a big problem. High sugar diets are a big problem, especially with anxiety, especially with depression, especially if you already have and you have some kind of depression or anxiety, then then diet is something that you should definitely look at. In terms of sugar, we all know that feeling when you've had too much sugar. Everyone's fed their little toddler too much sugar and seen them go crazy wild. So we know what happens when too much sugar is in the diet. What goes up must come down. So we get blood sugar spikes, and then they crash down, and that can affect our mood just as much as it does also affect lots of other physical things in our body, which are not things you want to get into. But sorry, just turn the light back on.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
So the diet not only affects you immediately, so you often get that immediate effect. So you can feel in your body the effect of what you've eaten. If you've eaten high sort of palatable calorie, high fat, high sugar, processed foods are the worst. So by processed or ultra processed, we mean anything that's not a whole food, that's not one ingredient. So your apple is one ingredient, your anything with a list of ingredients that's packaged, that's, these are processed foods. Now, some processed foods are okay. Bread is a processed food, it has more than one ingredient. But things that are have really long, things you should look out for are the ones with really long shelf life. So anything that lasts really long, and fast food. So fast food tends to use like trans fats, and these fats are particularly nasty in terms of our mental and physical health, because they incite inflammation, and inflammation is systemic. So inflammation in your body will be inflammation in your brain. So definitely food is something that everybody has control over. I think that's why it's such a powerful tool when you're trying to improve your overall health. You do this, you're putting food in your mouth 3 or 4 times a day, or more. So you have this opportunity, and everything you put in your body can either help you or harm you. It's either going to be a positive force, and it's going to help you feel balanced, feel calm, feel full, feel energetic, have good sleep, or it's going to do the opposite. And I think it's definitely one that a lot of people don't think about, especially when it comes to mental health. I think we all know that eating crap food is junk food isn't good for us. But I don't think we really understand how long lasting those effects can be in terms of our mental health. When I changed my diet was when my mental health changed. Absolutely, for sure. And I now treat my son, who has ADHD, through diet, and the changes in his symptoms of ADHD, which were really profound. He had a very severe type of ADHD, were amazing. So, and they weren't overnight. It's not a quick fix, and I think that's the thing. A lot of people want a magic bullet or a tablet or pill, but it is profound and it's lasting, and he is a happier, healthier boy. And the knock-on effect from using food in this way and from addressing how you eat is that it cleans up everything else. So not only do you feel better in your body, you may lose weight if you had to lose it, you have more energy, you are less anxious, less depressed, you feel, all of these great things. You also suddenly have better sleep, and that comes to my second one, which is sleep, because without sleep, forget it, it's everything. And I think that's one thing that young people kind of poo-poo a bit, because go to bed, you need to get your sleep, and it's just like rolled eyes and whatever, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I mean, that's the culture we live in, isn't it? The sort of sleeps for the weak. And it's terrible, because one night of I heard this recently, which has shocked me actually, that one night of disrupted sleep can be akin to having drink driving if you've had a glass of wine. So the impairment that happens with lack of sleep is profound. And that has an effect on your irritability, on your congeniality, how you feel, how you can handle stress, how you can concentrate at college or school. It also affects how you eat, funnily enough. If you get poor sleep, you're more likely
stress
to
eating.
Stress eat, yeah. So these are really intertwined, and the knock-on of those two things. And the other thing I think young people could do really easily, actually, as a benefit to their mental health, is get outside. And I don't think we do it enough, and I don't think people realise how profound that can be. And there are studies now that show the reduction of cortisol and adrenaline in the body from spending time in nature. So in the UK now, for example, our NHS, our health service, have just started to prescribe what they call a green prescription for people with anxiety and depression. For instead of just handing out the pills, they say, right, you're going to come and spend some time in nature, and you have these sort of green prescriptions when they also
nice.
it's really, it's just a groundbreaking, I think, that we're thinking in these.
And the one thing I don't agree with in this country is they hand over medication so easily.
Yeah.
I mean, I have so many children whose parents will come to me and say, my child is on antidepressants, and that's the next thing that I want to hear from you is, and I'm like, what are antidepressants? Basically, you're putting a lid on the depression and you're saying, don't come out.
Yeah.
And you're giving somebody a tablet and saying, don't come out. And the minute they stop taking the tablet, their depression rears its ugly head again.
Yeah.
So, that's, and more young people are getting onto it. So what is your thoughts on antidepressants? Very keen to hear this. This is for our youth coming from a health coach. We'd like to hear your views on it. So youth can kind of depend on antidepressants, anxiety pills, antidepressants, all of these things.
I think there's a time and a place for medication. I think that if you are in a really bad place, then meds like SSRIs, anxiety and anti-anxiety can be the motivation to get you to claw your way out of that hole. So I'm not anti-meds. I was on meds myself for many years, but they are a stepping stone. They are not a panacea. They are not the answer to the problem. They are a tool that can support you while you find the answer to the problem. And I don't think they should be used long term. I don't think they should be prescribed as much, not even half as much as they are. They are,
especially in the United States.
They still are here. And their efficacy is not that great. I mean, I can't remember the statistics, but I think it was only something like 50% of people actually respond. So they come with a lot of side effects, plus it's, sort of been demonstrated that things like that the sort of things that we're discussing, these lifestyle, habits and things that you can do to support yourself have as much effect as antidepressants. So you can, if you change your diet, if you can, get outside, if you connect with people, this is a really important one, exercise, movement, these things are as effective as antidepressants, but you need to be in a good place to do them. And that's where antidepressants, I think, come in, is that, I've had clients that have said, I want to get off my tablet. I mean, we have several people come to me because they want to get off tablets. They want to come off their meds. And that's brilliant, and that's admirable. And we do that, and we try and get them off these meds. But it's, you have to have those habits and those processes running. You have to be in that place that you can be happy, healthy, confident enough, in a good place to then wean off those meds. Because, and like you said, you need to find out what's the cause, what's the root cause of that depression. So what was causing those problems? And if a person has a really bad diet, for example, then the first thing I would say is, right, let's clean up the diet, because this connection between your gut and your brain, the gut-brain axis. So what you eat, it's not just damaging in terms of the high sugar content, and it's damaging in what you're not eating as well. So it's not just what you are eating, and the sort of,
it's what you're not eating.
It's what you're not eating. And if you're not eating high fiber and vegetables and all of these things, you're not feeding your gut microbiome. And your gut microbiome, as you probably know, is this little, I call them an army of like minions that live in your gut, that basically digest your food for you. And they do a lot more than that. They're basically the epicenter of your health. And what they do with the food, if we feed them well, they will chomp up our food, and they love particularly fiber and short chain. They make short chain fatty acids out of them, and then these the metabolites of what goes on in our gut become our neurotransmitters. So we make serotonin in our gut, we make dopamine, we make these things, and we also, our gut then talks via our vagus nerve and through hormones that they, are then released into our bloodstream to our brain. So our gut health and what we eat is so fundamentally important to our mental health that you couldn't have one without the other. So if you are just taking an antidepressant and carry on eating, terrible food, and you're not moving and you're not getting outside, you're not doing all these things, I can't see how that's going to ever be a solution, in my eyes. And I think a lot of people will stay on those meds for a really long time, and then that's when I get them. They will come to me and say, I've been on this med for however many years. It doesn't even make me feel good anymore. I can't, I've got all these side effects. So yeah, I think there's a time and a place, and maybe at that rock bottom time, that's the time and the place. But they are not a panacea, and they're not a long-term solution, and they are also not effective if we're not doing all the other things as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So to all the parents, thank you, Sue, that was super helpful. To all the parents and to youngsters who are listening to this, please, let's keep in mind, do not put your children on antidepressants immediately the minute you find out that they're struggling, because that's the easy way out. We can't fix it. Visit a health coach, go find out what's the good diet for your child to have, or help them go outside, but do not put them on antidepressants as your first answer to any problem. A humble request to all parents and to all youngsters. I'm very keen on one more question, So what kind of foods do you actually promote? I know you said not unprocessed foods, but is there any particular kind of foods that you promote to our youngsters which you think would be beneficial for their mental health?
Yeah, so actually the Mediterranean diet has been shown to be the most beneficial to mental health. Or a modified Mediterranean diet, and that's basically what I have eaten for many years now. And I tweak it. I get better and better. I tried many different diets, including going vegan, and actually then I added back in fish for my mental health. So a Mediterranean diet would be mainly whole foods, minimal amount of processed food. I still eat cake on my birthday. I'm not a saint, but on a daily basis, I'll eat whole grains, so oats, barley, quinoa. I don't know if you have that there. Buckwheat, these grains, whole grains. I will eat legumes, chickpeas and beans and lentils as much as I can. I eat fish. Fish is particularly good for mental health. Well, omega-3s are, so oily fish. Oily fish, not a lot of kids like them. My son, for example, he doesn't like fish, so I actually do supplement with that. It's one of the things I would supplement with is good omega-3 fatty acid, because that's actually one of the supplements or one of the compounds that has the most research behind it when it comes to mental health. What else? Eat the rainbow. I mean, the old ones are have the most truth in them, don't they? So I remember my grandmother talking about eating the rainbow, and dash it all, she was right. With all the science that we have now, what's telling us is that that gut microbiome, we were talking about the little guys that are beavering away, they love diversity. So they love they don't really particularly like having the same thing over and over again. So say, for example, you were eating a really super healthy diet, you were only eating carrots and kale and chickpeas, but you're eating it every day, it's still not diverse enough. So trying to eat as many different kinds of things. Again, this is not, I know kids are not can be picky, but try things. Just keep trying and keep trying them. Even trying something is good because you're shaking things up. But lots of different vegetables and fruits, and try not to eat things that are overly processed. And I think the thing is, when you eat, so if you're eating really late at night as well, that can really disturb your sleep, and it can make you feel anxious. So if you're like you're lying in bed. So the one of the problems I hear a lot is people can't get to sleep. The kids can't get to sleep. They get wired up. I mean, my son's terrible for this, because I think that moment before he goes to bed is the only time he hasn't got tech in front of him, for starters. So then the mind starts going, right? There's no more tech, no more disturbance. The mind starts going, and that's when he felt a great deal of anxiety. I think that can happen that time just before bed. We get anxious, and the ways we don't help ourselves through that is the blue light. So having the tech late at night, eating late at night. So whatever you're eating, particularly sugary stuff. If you're eating sugary stuff late at night, that can make you feel disconcerted and anxious and a little bit wired. And it's also going to impact your sleep and how well you sleep. So even if you are getting to sleep, if you've eaten late, even if you've eaten quite healthily, in fact, if you've eaten really late, your body's still digesting it. And so your body's still working. So you're not going to be in that lovely rest and restoration phase of sleep that, you can get into. So that's something that everybody could think about.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a night routine to have a morning routine, because it's a cycle, right? If you don't get good night's sleep, then you wake up in the morning, then you're cranky and you can't achieve anything, and then you have a bad day, and then it falls into the night. So I think just to think of having a night routine to have a good morning routine, I think that kind of works well. So yes, that was super helpful.
Yeah.
My last question. So I've been having this battle with my son. I'm vegetarian. I've been vegetarian for a few years now. And I've been wanting to turn vegan, but he's totally against it. I want to hear your views on a vegan diet. And what are the...
in terms of mental health or physical health or both?
I think both. I've come across a lot of people who have gone vegan, and of course they great bodies, and they're yoga instructors, mostly in the yoga world, and most of them are vegan. So I want to hear your views on it, because I know it limits your diet, and how does it affect your mental and physical health?
Well, I think I know a lot of very, very healthy vegans, and it's a diet and a lifestyle that I would fully support. I think it's definitely down to the individual. If you are vegan, then there may be a couple of supplements that you would want to take in terms of like your vitamin B12 and possibly omega-3s, just because you can't get them in abundance from food. With omega-3 and vegan, for example, you can find omega-3s in things like flaxseed seeds and flax seeds and walnuts and this sort of thing, but the body doesn't convert it into the kind of omega-3 that we can use that's bioavailable to us particularly well. So there would be some supplementation. I personally would supplement, and when I did a vegan diet, I did supplement, and actually I still supplement with B12 because I don't eat red meat or any meat. Actually, I only eat fish. But I think it's each to their own on that one. I think as long as you're diverse, you have a diverse range of foods, I think that's way more important. And you listen to your body, you listen to how it feels. I mean, that's why I ended up adding fish back into my diet, because and eggs, because eggs from my own chickens, because
I found that so cute.
Yeah, we've got them. But I tried these things and I say, how did it feel in my body? And this is way more important, I think, and it's principles. So it's out of, what are your values? What are your principles? Are you eating in line with those? Can you find a way that you can eat in line with your values and principles that feels good in your body? And it's as simple as that. And, I don't think any one diet is particularly better than another. I think it's personal choice, and you make it work for you, whatever, I don't think you're healthier because you're vegan. I know also a lot of very unhealthy vegans, because
is it? I think the vegan diet gives you like a lot of energy. I think that's the only reason that I'm interested in it.
Only if it's a whole food whole food vegan diet. If you Oreos are vegan, right? So you could just eat Oreos. and vegan ice cream all day. And that's not that you can say I'm vegan, but you're not healthy. So
Yeah,
it
that's true.
depends on the quality of the diet rather than what the breaking down those components and sort of like, so it's like the fight over low fat and low carb. It's like, get over it already. It's about quality of the individual foods rather than, the arguing about which has the most virtue, I think. So
Wonderful. I think I can go on and on and on. And I know I said last question was the last question, but I'm going to ask you one more. Your
okay.
thoughts on organic?
On organic. Okay, well, yeah, there is some merit to organic. Because of the way that we farm and the soil and the pesticides that are used in the soil, it can make a big difference. So, but I try and go for organic when there's a oh gosh, now what it's called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. If you can look it up online, where it shows you the best foods that to choose organic. So say if you had all the money in the world and you were like, I'm just going to buy organic everything, that's fine. You're hedging your bets. You're getting good produce. That's great. But if you were like me and you're like, oh my goodness, it's really expensive organic food, I can't afford everything, then you go to the Lean 15 Dirty Dozen list, and they're every year, and they show you basically which foods use the most pesticides and which are the most susceptible to pesticide toxicity. For example, like an avocado has got a really thick skin, things like that. But grapes have a very thin skin, and you just wash them and put in your mouth. So it gives you a list of what you could, if you were just doing a minimum amount of organic food shopping, then just do those things. And then, but I am a believer in organic is better. I must say. Yeah.
Okay. I think I can go on and on. I have so many more questions in my head, but I know we're all limited on time. But I think this is a good introduction to mental and physical well-being to our youth and to the parents of the youth. We will be putting the podcast on our various channels, on our various social channels, as well as on YouTube. And we will mention Sue's channels also, just in case you'd like to follow her. She's a health coach based in the UK again. She goes by One Precious Life. So please feel free to follow her on Instagram and on, Sue, are you on Facebook too?
Yes. One Precious Life UK.
So follow her on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll get some great pearls of wisdom. We all need a healthy life. I think the one thing that pandemic has taught us is the only thing that you can take, the one thing that you need to take care of is your health. So with that, thank you, Sue. Thank you so much for being with us on such short notice. I know I didn't give you a lot of time, but thank you and making the time for us to be able to grasp all your knowledge. And I'm sure we will keep in touch and see. Yeah. Thank you so much.